Okay, so let me welcome Anya and Stefano. These are our new panelists, and Christian staying on stage from our last talk. And as Matilda already said, we wanted to this year have a panel on digital identities. And it's clearly a hot topic. You probably have heard a lot about digital identities here at Go and also at the other affiliated events. Why is that so? Why is 2026 a particularly hot year for digital identities? Well, we have, I think, from my outsider views, at least two concurrent events. One is a deadline of the European Union for implementing digital identities wallet. This will be coming at the end of this year, so in December 2026. And on the other side, we have also maybe parallel or maybe like related push for mandatory age verification to access online content. And this is happening in the EU, of course, as consequence of the Digital Safety Act, but also in the US, where like 24 states are either implementing or have already implemented some form of age assurance legislation. So to start the panel, I would first ask the panelists to introduce themselves, maybe starting from Anya, and to say something about like your affiliation and your background when it comes to the world of digital identities.
All right. Okay. Yeah. So my name is Anja Lehmann. I'm a professor at the Hasso-Plattner Institute, and I work in anonymous credentials for for how long? 15 years, something like that. Probably I was 10 years at IBM Research, where I worked on that quite a bit. And I got a bit surprised from the UIDI wallet when it came up. So I think it was a surprise to many of us how fast it progressed. I was one of the persons who gave feedback to the current architecture. And I'm now also working as part of the German UIDI team to get anonymous credentials into the current infrastructure.
Right, yeah. I'm Stefano Tessaro. I'm a professor at the University of Washington. Actually, I mostly work on cryptographic theory as it relates to real-world cryptography. I ended up being sucked into this anonymous credential space because I ended up working on related topics and then working on BBS, but I'm also interested in general in policy aspects. I spent a lot of time before on rolling out exposure notification solutions, for example, and how it relates to real-world policy and privacy. And so this was kind of a good match now, working on it and getting dragged into this political drama now that is going on. Yeah.
I'm Christian Kamhans. I'm a PhD student at EPFL. I work on kind of post-quantum ZK snarks on one hand, on the more, the thing you could use to build some credentials. And then on the other hand, on kind of understanding how crypto tools fit into our societal things that we deploy and what kind of harms they enable, as you've seen just before.
Hi, I'm Anna Lisianska. So I started working on anonymous credentials before they were called anonymous credentials. I think maybe it was a paper that Jan and I wrote where we actually started calling them that. I'm not actually sure, but I think that was our Eurocrypt paper from 25 years ago. So it's been a while and I feel old. So when I first started working on it, it was just kind of very, very abstract. And, now it's becoming real. I have some theories. But actually, now that we've all introduced ourselves, can we have the audience introduce themselves just like by a show of hands? So how many of you are affiliated with universities, like in academia? Okay, so the majority. Okay, and how many have with companies? Okay. Anybody with governments, working for the governments? Okay. Anybody working for like none of the above, like maybe policy think tanks, like policy organizations? Any policy organizations? Anybody who's like none of the above? Come on. Okay, so we're talking to, is it fair to say we're mostly talking to cryptography researchers? So raise your hand if you're a cryptography researcher. Okay. Raise your hand if you're not a cryptography researcher. All right. Okay. So, all right. So okay. In that case, I know what I want to tell you. So, so what was interesting, I think, a couple of years ago about this EUDI, the way it came about. I mean, I agree with Anya. It was surprising that they were so optimistic about how quickly they can roll something like this out. But that was one surprising thing. Another thing that actually was a really good surprise, positive surprise, is that they were actually very actively seeking community engagement. Like the fact that they used GitHub to solicit input. That was kind of cool. And there were like a gazillion comments, and so many of them were trolls. And I'm like, I can't believe I'm actually reading like an official government. Like this is how, the EU governments, like these, supposed bureaucrats in whatever, they're actually not. Like they're interacting with us. And they really, tried to contact everybody they could think of to solicit our feedback. So that was really cool. And I also thought it was really cool that, Anya and I took screenshots of all the participants in those conversations. And then we're like, these are cryptography researchers. Let's get everybody on the same page. And like, we gave them we weighed in on what we thought was a good approach. And I think the fact that there was a consensus among the cryptographers they asked was a very important factor in how people ended up thinking about it. So I don't know, I'll stop talking in case there are questions.
Thank you, Anna, for the good introduction. And first of all, feel free at any moment in the panel to raise your hand, and I will come with you, or Ken will come with you with a microphone, so you can interact with the panelists and ask them questions. Maybe I will add a bit more context on this ADAS legislation for the ones in the public that don't know much about it. So why are we all surprised that it went so fast? Well, because this law was passed at the start of 2024 with a deadline for implementation at the end of 2026. And this period, like where they were collecting feedback, was at the start, so just as the law was being passed. And if I remember correctly, there were like different jump scares with this law. Like there was a very initial jump scare in April 2024. I don't know how many of you remember, but there were like a lot of, like there was an EFF initiative to stop ADAS Article 45. And I don't know about you, but like that kind of like nothing happened at the end, and I kind of had forgotten about this. So like just before this panel, I dug the article back, and like what was happening back then was that ADAS was also trying to legislate how like browsers would need to accept digital identities, and like according to a glaring majority of technologies, this would like really break the trust model of browsers and enable like a lot of bad things. Like it would force all browsers to trust national certificate. Now this was averted, like in the final legislation, a carve-out for browser was passed so that we don't need to break the TLS and the internet PKI to implement ADAS. But then there was an open letter, and I think most of you, like all of you except for Christian, were signing this open letter because the original text of ADAS didn't really consider like private ways to implement these digital identities. And so you were pushing for using anonymous credentials. And in particular, I think there are two directions, like BBS signatures and zero knowledge proofs that are trying like two ways to realize that. Maybe you can say a few words about these two technologies and what is the state of the art? Like what's actually happening there?
Maybe since the microphone is here, I want to clarify that it's one thing effectively, because it's just that the question is really whether, so the general paradigm is to have a signature with a proof of knowledge on top of it. And then the question is whether you want to be generic or whether you want to rely on a signature scheme that allows for much simpler proofs. And we have many such schemes, and then somehow BBS has emerged as the one that has been favored, but you can still go for the generic solution that works with any scheme, but that means mostly nowadays ECDSA. So for, yeah. I don't know if you.
Yeah. So the current legislation is like some signature scheme plus some zero-knowledge proof of that for the attributes.
That was more like the technical aspect, the legislation.
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe just very clear, quick clarification. So the EIDAS regulation, the legal text, if you read it as a cryptographer, mandates anonymous credentials. It has unlinkability in there, unobservability, selective disclosure. So everything that anonymous credentials and only anonymous credentials can give you is in there. The technical realization, because of reality, constraints, hardware, and so on, is not using anonymous credentials. It's using batch issues of one-time ECDSA credentials. And we are now advocating for anonymous credentials in what form or shape, whatever. So yeah, there's some people call it competing. I don't think they kind of necessarily compete. They're kind of different angles of either going for optimized versions, other ones that are more legacy compliant. I think in some use cases you're stuck with legacy systems, and others you have more flexibility to issue. So I think it's implementation details, and we should rather kind of focus on the big picture, not of what is the best signature scheme. In the end, I don't think there is the one best signature scheme. I think it will always depend on use cases and constraints.
I have a question from the back.
I just wanted to add that, you know, if you have a favorite signature scheme and you want to think about how to make sure that it lends itself to proving knowledge of the signature on a committed value, you know, like then you can contribute to the space, like any signature.
Oh, go ahead. Oh wait, can I ask a question or? Yes. Okay, I'm gonna play that. Since I'm a Japanese, I didn't know about much about the digital ID thing, but like I know that I've been hearing about this like in this crypto community a lot, but I wasn't aware that it was gonna happen the end of this year. And is this a hard deadline for us, or are they gonna fix on one protocol, or is this a rolling thing that they can kind of keep on updating?
Again, not an official answer that I can give, but the law is very specific about it. But I think the EU has already said that they will not fine countries if they're not ready. So I think technically the deadline is even 25th of December. I think Germany said they will roll out the first version in January. Other countries also said it's probably rather somewhere next year. I don't think any country will have what's called a feature complete UID wallet because they have a lot of things in there, which are really hard to do. There's also some pseudonyms, some login procedures to very big platforms. A lot of things are still being developed. So I think we will see the first wallets the beginning of next year, maybe end of this year, but they will be continuously developed and extended. So it's not a one-shot thing that's out there. We start with something and then continuously add features, add better cryptography and so on.
I see. And as a community then, is there like a most important point that we want to meet first and then kind of add on?
So I would say, I mean, from my kind of view, obviously anonymous credentials, how to get it in there. What's the best approach to have these truly privacy preserving schemes in a way that are usable and usable to not only to Europe, but also to Japan. So because we need for these things, we need to have standards, we need to have interoperability because every country already has their slight different requirements and already existing identity infrastructure. So we need to build cryptography that can be used across the globe without having a fixed thing that we just can copy and paste. So I think having a better approach to modularize this very complex cryptographic thing to make it usable, to me, is, I think, the most pressing thing. And of course, post-quantum. But yeah, that's one of it.
Right. So I find panels boring where everybody agrees. So Anya asked us to look at the big picture. So let me ask what I think is a big picture question. Are we the baddies? Are we building privacy-preserving control systems that allow anyone who happens to take state power to turn off and on access to public resources for whatever group they deem necessary?
Thank you for your question. I mean, I think there are different angles to this, but I feel that one thing that we should be thinking about is what is going to happen anyways, right? So, I mean, if you think about the context of, I think we haven't actually specifically talked about age verification. I mean, we talked about it in the prior talk, but not on this panel. And this is something that is happening. It was mentioned before, there are states in the US that already have some pretty horrible solutions where you either do AI face recognition or you upload a copy of your passport. And then I do not know, like in this context, I have a hard time I mean, maybe I'm naive, but I don't see that we can stop that from happening. And then I see privacy enhancing technologies and anonymous credential as a way to make it better. Now, your question is like, if we enhance this to something much bigger, are we being the baddies or not? Again, I think if I have to consider, I'm visiting now Switzerland for a while, and if I count the number of times I had to upload my passport just to set up things, I mean, this is happening already, and I feel making things better is something where we can contribute to. So I don't feel there's something we can stop there. I mean, if you have an idea how we can roll back these things even and undo them, then maybe this will be a plan, but I don't think it's available.
So I actually wanted to counter that a little bit and say that if I reveal everything about me in the clear, that makes it easier for the baddies to say, okay, here's how I want to cut off access. Like it really makes it a lot more arbitrary. But if somebody has to design a system that's well specified that says, these are my criteria for granting access, and it's done within the context of a democratic society where these things are up for debate, that seems to be a little bit, more conducive to better outcomes.
So let's have the panel disagree. No, I understand this question. I think there's also a reasonable argument to be made that this kind of privacy washing argument, that if we design a solution that is privacy preserving, it's hard to argue to policymakers that this thing should not be deployed because there are other harms that occur because some entity somewhere can decide what goes on the age verification list that should be kind of checked, or these kind of rules can be updated to be age verification and some other attribute that can be deployed later on. And if you have a kind of extremely private system that is very well designed, it's hard to communicate this to policymakers compared to if you had a bad solution where you're just showing your passport, and it's a lot easier to argue that obviously there shouldn't be censorship capabilities that we built into this thing because it's so bad in other ways. So I think there is a fine line between kind of preparing for what's coming and adding zero knowledge and making it kind of not as bad as it could be, and adding privacy in a way that removes our ability to argue to policymakers that this thing as a system shouldn't exist in the first place.
Maybe if I can slightly qualify one aspect that maybe got lost in this, like when we will have, and since we will have digital identities, it feels to me that when we have this tool, we will overreach to this tool and start to use this tool to implement a lot of things that don't need digital identities. For instance, for child protection and age verifications, there are alternative solutions that are entirely non-cryptographic. And that's what, like, something that is being now proposed in the state of California, which is instead of relying on every person having to prove that they are above 18 when accessing some web service, you could have the devices do this for you. So when you buy a new phone, you can set it up. If you're a parent, you can set it up as a device for a child, and then all the websites can declare to the operating system that they have content that is not safe for children, and then without any cryptography or without any identity verification, this filtering can be implemented. And so it's interesting that since we have these tools and since we can argue that they are private, now we're reaching for them to build this kind of mechanism where maybe like this is the entirely wrong tool to solve child safety, especially because these tools have, as Shannon and Christian showed before, some inherent risks. I don't know if any of you want to try to rebut this or...
I mean, a bit to rebut, but also to also answer to the previous question. So whether we are the baddies or not, so I think we have digital identity systems already out there, and they're neither privacy preserving, they're neither secure. So we make pictures of our EID all the time. And I think if we just focus on that, we can actually make systems that are more secure, more privacy preserving. And I also would like to kind of say that I slightly disagree with the talk that was there before that was saying, it looked at a lot of use cases, buying an eSIM, renting a car, and saying these are all use cases that require identity and then we don't need anonymous credentials. I think a lot of these use cases don't require identity. So we're sharing our name, our address, our date of birth when we are renting a car or buying an eSIM. None of them has ever sent me a birthday present. So I'm not sure why they need these two kind of attributes. They typically want to know that I exist and that I have a digital identity. So I think if we focus on use cases where we're currently oversharing a lot of information, then the solutions they're building is much, much better than the status quo. But I agree, and that's also the risk that I'm seeing, and we have to approach that, is that there's a lot of demand of now basically increasing the amount of information that we are sharing. Because people say now we can actually, if you have a digital identity, we could ask you for kind of these scope exclusive pseudonyms, that you have a unique pseudonym per web page, which I think is great for governmental services where we currently are uniquely identifiable and we can basically break the barrier to become more privacy preserving. But if we're now using that all over the place, all over the web, this is getting scary. There's some things inherent in pseudonyms that make them trackable. It's binding identities online to national identity. But these are two different things. I think if there's a way to contain digital identity to systems where we share it at the moment, this is kind of much better than the status quo. But we have to find a way to not make it the right tool and the hammer that we put on every use case that is just asking for more information, and be very careful and just say, you don't need that. There are other ways to provide that service without asking for this extra information.
Maybe on this hope that this technology helps things making more private and not less private or less more controlled by the state, because these things is easy to deploy and get deployed where we don't need it at all. Do you know any policy, law, or plans on making sure that, or trying to make things move in that direction?
So one of the things that currently EU is trying to take a step back, but Germany is one of the countries that is trying to fight for that, is to have these registration certificates, so that relying parties, if they want to access certain information from your wallet, they also need to register. They need to prove that they have the right to, for instance, ask for your full identity backed up with a national kind of identity seal. So that's one way to say the wallet can simply not share information if the relying party doesn't have also a legal mandate to ask for that information in the first place. So for me, that is, yeah, that could be one of the things. But yeah, more I'm not sure.
To expand a bit on the last question, so there are laws that now mandates to reveal some information for which we could use those techniques to prevent revealing more information. But I have never seen laws that also describe what privacy guarantee we have, because as of now, I see no legal barrier to first implementing a very private things to, for example, to say that we are adult to access a social site, and just without telling anybody, just destroy all the privacy aspect without telling anybody, and then you're just giving your identity to the government each time you access this site. So do you know if we have some, I mean, the tech people are actually used as, some legal guarantees that the tech people are not just used as bait to give us, to give this information to whatever government entity. I'm not sure if I'm very clear.
So, well, I guess we're asking jointly. So this is not something that will be covered by GDPR, in your opinion, or?
Yeah. So, I mean,
maybe to understand your question a bit better, but I don't know. If
yeah. Sorry. I guess my idea is: do we have any guarantees that all the privacy tools that we are building will be used in the long term and not just used for a bit before they just say that they don't want to use it anymore, but the habit of giving those information online is already in the law?
I do not know a good answer.
Yeah, I guess the question is in the direction of like, are there maybe planned laws that would like mandate a reduction in the number of attributes that we have to disclose, or like also one personal curiosity I have is last time I checked, like the implementation of this privacy measure in the law was recommended but not mandatory. Is that still the case? Do you have a sensation if it will ever become mandatory in the law to implement this? Or?
I don't know is the answer, but I think kind of what you said earlier is that this technically should already be mandated by the GDPR. Because the GDPR says that you're only allowed to ask for the information that is minimally necessary for a particular task. And I think this is a bigger question that has nothing to do with digital identity. I don't understand why the world we live in is actually legal in Europe, where we are sharing way too much information all the time, where my weather app is not working unless I share my GPS coordinates in 5-minute intervals. They don't need my GPS. I don't think I influence the weather that much. But somehow this is legal, and they even share that with 327 partners if you read the terms and conditions stuff. So we have great laws in Europe. I would like to see them enforced much more kind of strictly to have a more privacy, aware environment.
Yeah, I just want to add that I think this question on the legal side of things, my impression is that one has to be, I understand the anxiety and I share it with you, but I think there's a little bit of stress testing that is always needed for these things, because the laws usually are not written with a clear understanding of the technologies that are being implemented. And you're actually kind of lucky in Europe with GDPR. I think the United States is a much wilder land in this context. And sometimes things just need a court case to be assessed. But I don't know if you want to add something from the US situation from your perspective. But
Yeah, I think in the US it is a little bit of a Wild West, but in the US people are very litigious. So if something goes really wrong, then in the US, then you can sort of get people very, very afraid. So that's sort of the flip side. But the hard thing in the US is that it's not easy to prove that a harm has come to you as a result of a data breach. So that's TBA whether that's possible.
So since we've gone legal, do you know to what extent European CRA will affect digital wallet? Cyber Resilience Act?
I think we went outside of the scope of the knowledge.
Any lawyers, raise your hand if you're a lawyer.
Yeah. I think we actually try to get some more law people or like people from the legislative side to join this panel for this kind of questions, but they all decline our invitations. Maybe they were afraid to be put in a room full of cryptographers or quasi-cryptographers. Yeah.
Hi. So apart from the mandate that digital identity needs to be available, do you think or do you envision that most of the solutions will be kind of controlled or promoted by the government, or that there will be like a big marketplace where companies will by themselves promote solutions that actually really take advantage of digital identity?
Yeah, so that's actually an excellent question. I also wanted to say earlier. So the wallet is not restricted to government IDs. At the beginning, it will start with a government ID that is issued into the wallet and that you can use. But this is supposed to just be an infrastructure that everyone can issue credentials and then ask for attributes. And we currently see quite a strong demand from industry to use that. So also for age verification, for instance, if somebody thinks that's the right way to do, you don't need a government ID for that. It can also be other issuers. A bank can also say, I know that my people are over 18. I mean, kind of recursively, this also kind of relies on an identity, but you have other issuers that can also put information in there. Universities want to issue or are supposed to issue their diplomas in there. So if it works, I think we will see more uptake from that. Obviously, then there are also kind of more challenges to make sure that this isn't kind of growing out of hand. But this is exactly one of the points of the wallet. It's not focused to national EID. It's an infrastructure for any sort of credentials.
Yeah, and just to add that at the moment, in terms of actual deployment, for example, Google has played a major role already. So I think and in fact, as far as if I remember correctly, listen, one of the application, they also act as the as the issuer of the actual credential, because governments cannot do it. So I think that's again one of these questions about control and whether we are fine with that. But it does seem that definitely industry is perfectly capable of coming up with it by themselves, and that's what they're doing, and they're also driving the technological discussion right now.
So my personal preference would be if whatever we settle on is arrived at using some kind of a democratic process versus just an industry giant saying this is how we're going to do it, and since we are in all of your pockets, we can get it done that way. Like, it'd be much better if there were, like, I mean, I like it that Google took a leadership role in this. That's good, but it would be even better if it were done as part of some kind of an identity technologies consortium, like where it's not just Google but also citizens, also policymakers. It doesn't have to be government necessarily. Like, sometimes the government can say, well, we're just going to let the industry figure it out, let the stakeholders figure it out. That's fine, but it shouldn't, in my opinion, it's really a slippery slope when it comes to like privacy and big data. If industry giants come in and say, we figured it out, just here it is, do it our way, especially ones whose entire business model depends on having our data. There would be no Google if it didn't sit on all of our data. So it makes me nervous.
Maybe to add to that as well. So as Anya mentioned, is use cases where this is kind of regulated and kind of enforced, where this issuer has to issue these credentials. There are use cases where industry wants these credentials to simplify their processes. I think we also have a role to play as kind of applied crypto people. If you're in the room, not all use cases have to be in this kind of EU digital identity framework, right? It doesn't need to be in your wallet. For example, there are a lot of applications where the issuer and the verifier are the same, and kind of it doesn't make sense for anyone else to kind of check those credentials, right? Any kind of subscription service that you have, you could also make privacy preserving using all the nice tools that are developed for the UIDF, this device binding, all these efficient proofs, and you could just deploy this kind of on the side without relying on this whole infrastructure, without having as much centralization, without having this whole revocation infrastructure and registries that the EU has. You could still have very nice credentials, more privacy by driving these use cases. So this might also be something that we can steer as a community to do nice protocols, try to pitch them into industry, and to maybe get more privacy this way by sidestepping these kind of big monolithic frameworks altogether.
So I also wanted to follow up a little bit. So before EUDI and before the EU government took a leadership position on this, the American government actually had a whole thing called the National Strategies for Trusted Identities in Cyberspace, which now sits with NIST. And that was developed in the first Obama administration. So in 2009, I think, is 10, 11, okay, when it came out. And the idea there was that this was going to be an infrastructure that was motivated by US government IDs, but then in order to make it sort of universal identity infrastructure, it had to be privacy preserving. And they wanted, what ultimately the EU came up with is probably what the US could have gotten there also. But I guess since you asked the question, maybe you can tell us what's going on with that piece of the puzzle, since it lives in NIST now.
It's just my personal opinion, by the way, and I'm not a NIST employee, just a contractor. I think the strategy was really good, actually. It brought to light, unlinkability and selective disclosure, etc. But then the pilots that arose from that some of them were horrible.
Yeah, actually, I can actually say something about that. So when this strategy came out, it had call for projects and proposals. So at the time, but only to US people. So at the time I was looking for a partner, and I found one. It's the same guys who created Eduroam, the Shibboleth guys. What were they called? I forget. They had the Shibboleth was the protocol they created that the Eduroam runs on. So all of you are using it right now. So I partnered with them, but back then, I think it was 2000. Yeah, it was around 2011. They were not even using digital signatures as part of this Shibboleth. The actual, the way that things were done, that authentication was done, was so far behind where the anonymous credentials vision was, that there's just no way I managed to bridge it. Like maybe it's my fault, I don't know. But but that pilot, what it did was just, I mean, I think now they use digital signatures. I think I taught them about digital signatures. I don't know if I should take credit, but anyway, but that's as far as I could get. Like,
so maybe we are actually in a better state than, like, out of all possible realities. But I think there was maybe one more question, and then
could I just follow up with it's a different question, but maybe making an analogy, like I would say, like, you know, maybe 20 years ago, people would talk about security, and then privacy was like something that was just added ad hoc, right? And I think today it's great that privacy is at least supposedly taken more seriously. And, you know, some of these concepts are well understood, unlinkability, etc. One thing that I still find some lack of is when I hear these discussions, people know very well what they want to protect in terms of privacy, but there's very rarely there's a discussion on the auditability that needs to be surround that privacy. So, you know, just as maybe a random example, let's say we do these private authentications. Will the user be able later on to prove that they were actually requested to send these attributes, right? And so there's a lot of space of options, but I don't think there's a clear understanding of what people want in terms of auditability that is composed with privacy. Do you have any thoughts on that and on how that lack of understanding might be part of what makes things difficult?
So there are some initiatives from civil society to build some of these auditability on top of the EU EDI. So Epicenter Works, for example, is an NGO that plans to have like a monitor to ask users to kind of phone home and say, okay, I was requested, you know, to present these attributes by this party at this point, and to kind of build a map of what users are, what blank parties are requesting, if it matches what they registered, if they're kind of requesting too many attributes. As far as I know, it's the only kind of effort, and it's like 3 people in an NGO building this on. It's not, as far as I know, something that the EUDF envisions as a core thing. Same for revocation, for example, right? You can have revocation and try to have some auditability that your credential was indeed revoked, or that, you know, you were issued this credential. I think the discussions at the EU level aren't kind of fleshed out too deep on that aspect.
There was a question from remote that I can read. Considering that age verification has already been implemented without anonymous credentials, do you know how these solutions have fared in those countries and states? For example, there was the Discord data leak in the UK. Do you think that there is a possibility of those privacy lacking implementations to be rolled back?
So from my understanding is whether, like, now that we already deployed some, for instance, age verification systems that don't have these strong privacy guarantees, do you think we will actually manage to roll them back? And maybe more in general, like, since we are rushing to like roll out the wallets, once we have a working wallet that is not private, will we ever manage to actually roll out the private version? Or
so my answer was going to be a little bit of a joke, actually. So if you want them rolled back, here's what you do. You find somebody who's using age verification, the non-privacy preserving age verification with, you know, identity, badly, not in a non-privacy preserving way, for porn. Use a provider who does that for porn, and try to harvest their data, and then try to anonymously blackmail the, you know, people on that list, and then and do it in such a way that, like, find especially like newspaper journalists, so that this would be like headline news: porn users blackmailed because they reveal private information. Then people might get the memo that they might want to use privacy preserving identity verification. So if you want it rolled back, this is the way to go.
There's a precedence from that. I mean, there was not porn, but like the release of data, anonymized hospital data in Massachusetts, and then finding the medical data from the governor of Massachusetts. So that does work quite well. So just do the same, but with porn. And I'm not saying the governor of Massachusetts would be on it.
not commenting on the legal advice that Anna gave you. But what I can see in Europe is that there is really the understanding that use cases that Anna just described really need privacy, and they also need kind of the really strong privacy where even the government cannot track you. So they understand that these use cases require something that like anonymous credentials. That's why they're still interested in investing in that. So I still hope that there is kind of some avenue to get that in. I think the bigger question still is, do we want to have age verification? Or having these sorts of authentication, to social media. So I think there was some, in some of the other EU regulations, they say that for very high risk platforms or very high risk services like porn or like online gambling, there you have to do age verification, but social media isn't in there yet. So I think also there we have to still engage in the discussion of where it's already mandated at the moment and where now are we trying to push age verification that has much broader societal implications. That's not a technical discussion, but I think one where we have to be careful between distinguishing age verification in general and age verification for social media.
Okay, we'll take one last short question and then we will begin to tear down the panel.
Yeah, my question is, you've brought up, we proposed this, we proposed that a little bit, but from this, it feels a little bit like the cryptography communities right now on the outside looking in. So we already heard the proposal of starting new porn sites, but how do we join the discussion? How do we get the policymakers, etc., to listen to us? Because I have the feeling it's being controlled by a bunch of companies that are lobbying in Brussels right now.
So I made the recommendation a few times, but maybe it helps if it's on video. I think ISCR should become also a lobby organization. So I think we also need scientists, not only cryptographers, but from many different areas to join this lobby work. Because as I said, in Europe, big companies are spending billions in order to get their way. And somehow we have to get the same amount of people in there that come from research, that come from some social society and civil society. Not sure how realistic that is, but I think we have to conquer that lobby approach.
Yeah, so on that note, I mean, I do not know whether the ICR will do that, but I think one thing that I want to caution everyone in the room is, and double down on the idea that we should have proper channels, is that most of us are academics and we like talking and we like sharing our ideas, but we have to be a bit intentional when we try to do this kind of work, because if we look what's happening right now, I think it's very easy to be dragged down in discussions like how many group elements should be in a credential. That doesn't help. And I think we spend a lot of energy in infighting about things that matter for accepting a paper at crypto, but are not very important from the policy perspective. So I like the idea of having a layer we can report to or give inputs to that will take care of this sort of lobbying in a somewhat professional way, or someone. It could be, it doesn't need to be something formally done by the ICR, but it could be some group of people that wants to do this seriously and understands how to talk to politicians and how to set up the initiatives.
So yeah, I think I can echo, like the open letters, for example, have had a big impact, right? Like the feedback has been received and they're considering anonymous credentials. Another feedback, which is more prosaic, is show them that it can be done. If you want anonymous credentials, implement them, do prototypes, show tables where you show this is this many kilobytes in this many seconds of proving time, so that somebody can pick this up and be like, this is actually practical. We could run this, right? This is very hard to intuit if you're not part of the cryptographic community that, of course, BBS is efficient even on phones, right? Like, how would you come up to this conclusion? So, and the same for kind of for use cases, right? If you want a private use case that isn't kind of super identity-based, go around, build it, implement it, publicize it, and then some industry or some EU lobbyist will pick it up maybe and make this happen.
So I completely agree with the question, and I completely agree with everything that was said. My only additional contribution to this is that there are organizations that kind of are in that space, and they're like policy organizations. So I know several of them in the US, and I'm happy to put in a good word, and if any of you are interested in helping them out, you totally should. Like, for example, the ACLU, they're very interested in privacy. They have like staff technologists, they have a blog, they're kind of on the lookout. They, when the US, when there was this proposal for these mobile driver's license, the ACLU blew the whistle on it. They really punch way above their weight. Like, they have people there who work their entire careers on like basically what's a PhD student's salary, because they are listened to in the US. Like, they have a big footprint. I mean, it's hard to compete with the Googles. Then there's an organization where I'm on the board. It's called the Electronic Privacy Information Center that just is going to like sue the crap out of stuff, out of places where they can, like for the sake of privacy, and they're pretty successful. And I don't know what these organizations are in the EU, but you should find out and you should support them. They need your expertise for sure. Like if you have the time to spare to like, because people who tend to work there, they're not necessarily that familiar with cryptography, but they do want to know what cryptography can do because they want to push the conversation towards a better outcome. But they do believe in privacy. So I think Anya knows some of those organizations and maybe she can follow up on what I'm just saying. And the other thing I wanted to say is that yes, we're kind of outside looking in, but then look at Anya. Like she's actually not just on the outside, she's also our person on the inside. Okay, I'm gonna give the microphone to Vernon.
Yeah, so to comment on what Anna said, so in Europe, it's, I mean, we heard about Epicenter Works, which is a small NGO. There's ADRI in Germany. The chaos community is quite active, but sometimes they're kind of also over pushing. So I think we also have to be careful in the conversation of not to be too alarmist, because otherwise just kind of even worse solutions, typically now with AI, are going to be rolled out. But another way is indeed kind of just reaching out to these folks. And what I have kind of experienced so far is that they're really happy for expertise and they ask questions. So politicians reach out now, journalists, the national UID wallet teams. So I just also give a call for everyone living in Europe. If you're interested in all that stuff, try to find out, or kind of ask me and I can try to find it out for you, who are the UID wallet teams in your country, and try to engage with them so that we can build this infrastructure together. Because at the moment we have like 4 or 5 countries which have cryptographers in there and we can have an informed conversation. But then there are 23 other countries that still need the same support and expertise.
So at some point I was talking to a former student of mine who was a congressional staffer in the US. That means he worked for one of our representatives. And he is a former student of mine, so obviously he has a computer science degree. And he told me that there are more people with computer science degrees who are actually in Congress than in congressional staff. As in, people with computer science degrees don't typically choose this as a career, but maybe they should. So that's another thing that, like, you know, tell your students who are not necessarily interested in becoming cryptography researchers that this is one way that they can have a very meaningful career, especially now that the world is changing and the computer science education is actually very helpful if you want to work in government. So that's just one more thing I wanted to add.
Okay, I think it's probably great that we close on this constructive note and on what you can do next if you're interested in joining like the effort to make this technology better. I would thank all of the panelists and all of you for having joined us in this edition of CO.